Hey fellow music fans, welcome back to Psychology of Rock. If you're new here, my name's Nina, and it's been a while since I made a video about any of the female rock and metal bands coming out of Japan, but that does not mean that I haven't been following them. And over the past year or so, many of you have asked in the comments if I would offer my thoughts on their rising popularity and what the reason might be that, at least here in the West, such a huge percentage of the fan base seems to be male. Now, as a female fan, I have to say that obviously there's not just one type of person or gender that gets hooked on these bands, but clearly I have to agree that there does seem to be a male-dominated audience. Now, according to concert reports from Japan, the audiences for Band-Maid concerts, which is really the only demographic stats that I could find that apply here, are composed of about 85 to 90% male fans between their 20s and 60s, with the majority of these attendants being on the older end of the spectrum. Now, I'm sure this fluctuates somewhat, and I'm also not sure how accurate this data is, but I have to say these figures do mirror the engagement I've seen online and at shows here in the US. And while these statistics are for Band-Maid exclusively, I think it's fairly safe to assume that the fan base for many of the other bands in this genre would likely not be too different. Although it is interesting because according to a recent study by the Pew Research Center, women are just as likely as men to be fans of rock music. So given all of these factors, I think the demographics of the fan base as well as the reasons for their dedication really are fascinating topics to explore. And of course, I'm going to offer my thoughts and theories on this, but I would also love it if you would share your thoughts, especially if you have been a member of the fan base for a while, because I think it would just add another layer to the conversation. And I might be biased, but I also think that this channel has an incredibly insightful and intelligent comment section, and I just love reading through your thoughts. So all of that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. Now, to really examine this, I think we need to start by exploring the possible reasons why female rock and metal that is specifically coming out of Japan is so popular in general. And I think the first thing has to do with availability. Japan unquestionably has a strong rock and metal scene with a long history of fantastic female bands, many of which have been able to achieve at least a moderate degree of commercial success. Here in the West, there are of course some phenomenal female artists, but the rock scene itself does not seem to have the same level of scene saturation with female bands. Now, growing up, I would literally see bands every single weekend, and almost all of them were male, like 95% of them. Seeing even a singular female member was rare, let alone a whole band. I was able to see a lot of bands that I really admired, like Babes in Toyland and L7, which were smaller bands, but that's what we had at the time, and it was just a really big deal to be able to see an all-female band back then. Now, thankfully, there's definitely been a rise in all-female bands in the West now, with many being absolutely incredible, like The Warning and Plush, but Japan still seems miles ahead as far as accessibility goes. So if you tend to be a fan of all-female rock or metal, there are just more bands to discover that are coming out of Japan. So that is one thing, but I definitely don't think that is the only thing. Now, it was fairly recently that I found any of these bands, and I can't thank this channel enough for pushing me down the rabbit hole because now I can't get enough. It was after I made one of my first videos, which was about The Warning, that probably 100 people at least told me that I had to check out Band-Maid. So that was my first exposure to the genre, and I was speechless when I first heard them. And what hit me right away was the musicianship. The pure technical skill is just mind-blowing, and not just with Band-Maid, it's all of them that I've heard. Now, I play guitar, so that's always the first thing that I notice, and these ladies can definitely shred, but they are masters across the board. Bass, drums, vocals, they are all on another level, and together is like pure musical magic. So I don't think I'm the only one that is completely impressed by this type of technical skill. I think a lot of fans of rock and metal in general really appreciate and seek out this level of musicianship. I think a lot of the popularity of many of the subgenres of rock and metal, like progressive rock and thrash metal, has a lot to do with the emphasis on technical proficiency. And this is an area where many of the Japanese artists really shine. Two of my favorite bands right now are Nemophila and Lovebites, and this is definitely a huge part of the appeal for me. But there hasn't been a band that I've heard yet in this genre that I didn't find to be unbelievably impressive from a musicianship point of view. They're also really creative and write incredibly well-structured compositions, and many of these bands are not afraid to experiment with different styles and genres, which also adds a layer of novelty to their music. They are simply phenomenal songwriters. And for me, the fact that they are female and have this level of ability in both playing and composing is something that I absolutely love. Now, obviously, musical ability transcends gender, and I think that people, at least for the most part, appreciate great music regardless of who creates it. But given the fact that rock and metal have been so dominated by male artists for years and years, it just feels really empowering to see these women absolutely crushing it on stage. And I think this is something that the male audience really appreciates as well. In fact, I feel like their male fan base is incredibly supportive and have really helped to create a positive and inclusive atmosphere. I think they love the fact that these artists are women, which is really refreshing because their talent really does speak for itself. I also think that music coming from a female perspective is something that not only has been largely missing, but also adds something unique that expands the genre's emotional range. Rock and metal have traditionally explored themes of anger, rebellion, and social commentary, and these Japanese female artists are bringing new voices and perspectives to these themes. And on top of that, I think they're also injecting them with personal experiences that resonate in a way that wasn't as prominent before. And being a lyric person, I really like what a lot of these bands have to say, whether they sing in English or Japanese. I always look up the lyrics to see what they are singing about, and I find a lot of the themes really relatable. I think it adds another layer to their appeal, and I love that a lot of their viewpoints challenge stereotypes and help create a more nuanced picture of what it means to be strong and powerful. And again, the lyrics do obviously seem to be really appealing to a male audience as well, and many men in the comments section of this channel have specifically told me how impressed they are with what these bands have to say. Now, I don't think we can overlook the next factor, although I am curious to hear how much you all think it plays into their actual appeal. But I do feel like many bands have an overall aesthetic that can be visually captivating. I think Band-Maid is a great example of this, but certainly not the only one. And I don't think it undermines their talent in any way to point out that most of these artists are extremely beautiful or cute or have a strong visual impact in some way. I don't think any of these bands rely on this, but I also think that it does, at least for some fans, even further their appeal. And I don't think this is limited to the male audience. Visual appeal and image have been a huge part of the music industry from the beginning, which I know is something that a lot of people feel strongly about on one side of the issue or another. But many people really do enjoy not only the look of some of these performers, but also the contrasting image of femininity being paired with aggressive music. I think it's something that's both intriguing and unexpected, and it just makes all of it even more fun. If these ladies weren't insanely talented, it would be a different story, but the fact is that they are incredibly skilled and they deserve their popularity, so I have no issue at all with some of these bands making their image a part of the experience, especially because this is common practice in the entertainment industry anyway, even when it's not intentional. I also think another huge factor is their stage presence and charisma. Beyond their musical talent, these bands across the board are truly captivating performers. They absolutely own the stage and their energy is through the roof. These bands are extraordinary live, and in many cases, their live shows sound even better than these studio recordings. And if we're talking about why a lot of older fans are drawn to these bands, I think nostalgia plays a role because they grew up going to live shows and seeing these amazing bands play. And there was kind of a gap for a while. Being able to see this type of incredible live show again is just the best feeling, and these ladies definitely deliver. I think what also sets these bands apart is the mood of the shows. You look around and everyone is just smiling. It's heavy music, but it also makes you feel happy. And this is purely because of the performers and their personalities. There is something unique that their feminine energy brings to the performance, and they do seem to be a lot more positive than a lot of the male bands, which is something that I think we all appreciate. One other thing that I think is leading to such a dedicated fandom is the strong social media presence that many of these bands have that allow fans to connect with them on a more personal level. We're able to see new photos, videos, and updates on almost a daily basis. There's also a lot of groups and communities for people to share their passion for these bands. So I think that only intensifies the dedication of fans because they're able to connect with so many other people that are equally dedicated. I also think that these bands clearly adore their fans and really value their dedication. This is something that we definitely don't always see in the music industry, but I really do think there is a true reciprocal relationship going on there. And honestly, these artists are just extremely likable. They are funny, they're fun, they're smart, they're playful, and they obviously care deeply about what they're doing. So I think all of these factors play a role in the popularity of these bands, but it is still a little bit of a mystery to me why the fan bases are so male-dominated. I think it just might come down to the issue of rock and metal's traditional audience. While things are changing, historically, rock and metal have had an undeniably larger male audience, which there are a lot of reasons for that I can get to in another video. But I think the present fan base may have something to do with that, even though, as I mentioned earlier, recent studies have shown that females do, in actuality, like rock music as much as males. They may just be a little less vocal about it. It's hard to deny, however, that it seems like most rock bands, whether they are female or male, all appear to have an overwhelmingly male fan base, at least on paper. It could be true that more male fans just actively seek out and discuss these bands or actually go to the shows, which would create a skewed perception of the overall audience, although I have to say that I have never personally been to one rock or metal show ever that didn't seem to have more male fans than female fans there, even though I know plenty of females who love to rock out. I do think, however, that as Japanese female rock bands continue to gain international recognition, that their female fan base is likely going to continue to grow. So these statistics may very well change. And I have to reiterate that I truly believe that music transcends gender, and that any stereotype that we may have about rock fans in general is likely an oversimplification, and of course a generalization that is not going to apply to everyone. The fact is that these bands are incredible, and that is the biggest reason behind their success and the dedication of their fan base. But as I said earlier, I'd really like to hear your point of view and your personal reasons for following and supporting these bands, and anything that you think that I may have missed regarding the possible reasons behind the demographics of the fan base and their dedication. So please don't forget to leave your thoughts down below. But that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's analysis. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next week.